Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of what is the Arsenal Transfer Show, joining you every morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Hope you're doing good. Hope you're doing well. I'm throwing up on the screen straight away our show that we did yesterday. I was joined by Harry and Chris and Abby to talk about Arsenal's 3-0 win over against Oxford. So if you haven't already had the chance to give that a watch, it is the latest upload on the channel. So without further ado, please do make sure you go give yourself a watch of that. It's certainly worth it. It was a really good conversation, a really good chat. So worth listening to. Let's say good morning to people joining us in the chat box today. John, good morning to you, to Akmal, to Amira, Yomi, Black Shine, Red Star, Morgie, Martin, NSW, Jose, Olu, Kaiser. We got Stevie and Tom and Kevin. Good morning to you, Bram Percy. Peeny Ween, Wilson, Peter, James, and Matt G as well joining us in the chat box as always. Thank you so much for making this a part of your morning and with your orange juice or your coffee or your tea or maybe even your dinner, depending on where you are in the world, of course. But thank you most of all for being there for us and supporting the channel. Let's get on with today's stories. Of course, do drop a like and subscribe as always as well. But Azeez completed his loan switch to Wigan yesterday. He joins Kolo Touré's side for the remainder of the 2022-23 season. Kevin Betsy, of course, who you will probably remember as Arsenal's under-23 coach from last season, he left the under-23s to become Crawley's head coach. It didn't go too well there. And unfortunately, that meant that he lost his job and he parted ways with them in October. And he has since joined up with Kolo Touré to become his assistant coach at Wigan. So he, we understand, played quite a significant role in recommending Miguel Azeez as being a player that could bring something to Wigan's midfield between now and the end of the season as well. So you can be sure that we'll be getting updates on Miguel Azeez and on how he's getting on during our loan roundups at the end of each month. We've got the next one coming at the end of January, start of February. So make sure you're subscribed to get that piece of content. Arsenal have apparently set a price tag at around 40 million euros for Folarin Balogun. Now, the striker has done very well playing in France with Reims and scoring 10 goals, the third highest number of goals scored by a player in the league, only behind Kylian Mbappe and Neymar, of course, as well, with 13 and 11 goals respectively. And his future at Arsenal remains uncertain because we've got Gabriel Jesus and we've got Eddie Nketiah. And there's even talk that Arsenal want to bring in another forward during the winter window. And because of that, his future, of course, remains a little bit up in the air. Now, Arsenal have wanted to improve the way in which they sell players, the way in which they try and get money for players. And because of that, I'm hoping anyway, at least, that what we see is Arsenal able to make serious profit on players such as Folarin Balogun. And if Arsenal can get hold of the player for this amount of money, or rather can sell the player for this amount of money, it obviously represents a significant profit made on a youth project coming through the ranks as well. Is it the right decision? Do we know whether or not Balogun would be a success at Arsenal if we kept him for the long term, or if trading him in for that 40 million euros is the right choice? I'm not sure. But if we're getting, into the realms of paying significant money, it could end up being half the price we end up paying for someone like Mudryk in the future. So it's very interesting indeed to see how much we end up getting for someone like Balogun, but apparently the club has set a 40 million price tag on Balogun's head amid interest from both AC and Inter Milan. Now, according to reports in Spain, Arsenal were linked with an interest in Eric Garcia. However, the Spanish defender wants to stay in Catalonia until the foreseeable future. Arsenal are on the lookout for a left-sided centre-back and, of course, have seen links to the likes of Evan Ndika. We saw a report claiming that we'd even agreed a deal with the French centre-back playing at the moment for Frankfurt. However, that's certainly gone very quiet, and there's been questions around whether or not that is indeed true or not. But Eric Garcia is apparently one of the players on the radar. Of course, Arteta knows him from his time at Manchester City. I don't think he's done particularly well since moving away from City. And to be honest, even at City, there was question marks around him, even though City wanted to keep hold of him. I think Arsenal should probably be looking elsewhere for a centre-back in the summer if they indeed do want one. Now, one of the striker targets that was an alternative to Joao Felix was, of course, Memphis Depay. However, Atletico Madrid are now in talks with Barcelona after potentially trying to organise a move for the Dutch international until maybe the end of the season, maybe slightly longer. Atleti and Barcelona have a history of trading strikers. You think about Antoine Griezmann, Luis Suarez, David Villa. It has happened quite a lot. And Memphis Depay might become the next on a long list of forwards that have been linked between the two clubs. So if Arsenal want to get a hold of a forwards and if they see Memphis Depay as an option, they are going to have to get on their bike and try and get hold of this one very quickly because Atleti are moving fast to replace Joao Felix with Memphis Depay amongst other options as well. Now, Arsenal transfer target Danilo, who we've talked about on a number of occasions, who we hear Arsenal have cooled their interest in over the last 6 months or so. Apparently, Nottingham Forest, according to Fabrizio Romano, are closing on a 20 million euro deal for the player. They, of course, had that 50 million pound, around 80 million euros bid rejected only this week, and they've already returned with an improved offer for the 21-year-old central midfielder. I imagine that a lot of Arsenal fans will be watching this one carefully, believing he is the right option for Arsenal this window, and we'll be seeing how he then transitions to the Premier League over the course of the rest of this season. I'm hoping that, as Jean says in the chat box here, the hope is that we've cooled our interest in Danilo because there is a better option for Arsenal either now or in the summer. A number of links to Declan Rice have, of course, surfaced, and maybe that's possibly the reason. But Arsenal know they need immediate impact now. Whether or not Danilo could give that to them now remains to be seen. But Forest seem to be closing on that 20 million euro deal now for the Brazilian midfielder. And our headline story of the day is that Mykhaylo Mudryk has indeed left Ukraine with the Shakhtar Donetsk squad to travel to Turkey for a training camp. There's been, despite all of the liking of Instagram posts and everything else, he hasn't kicked up a fuss. He hasn't refused to train or travel or play, and he will indeed be included in that Shakhtar squad that will be traveling for the training camp. Now, this does not impact or deter talks from going on. Talks are continuing between both Arsenal and Shakhtar. If you remember, we talked about yesterday those reports coming from Ukraine and France claiming that Arsenal were very close to agreeing the overall figure with Shakhtar. Now, that has been kind of not rubbished, but certainly quelled somewhat by some of the more reputable lines, Fabrizio Romano and James McNicholas, claiming that Arsenal aren't necessarily as close to agreeing a deal with the Ukrainian side as maybe some have led us to believe at this stage. But that doesn't mean that they won't, and that there is still a certain optimism and confidence, those two words that we continue to hear regarding this deal, that a deal can ultimately happen before the transfer window finishes. It does seem one that is going to be continuing to drag. What was an interesting development yesterday is that, according to Matt Law, Chelsea are a bit surprised by the amount of talk and reports claiming that they had a serious interest in Mudryk. Apparently, their interest was no more than exploratory. I'm finding it difficult to believe this stance. I don't doubt the information where it's come from in terms of them reporting it. I don't doubt that they have been given this information to then report. However, what I doubt is the legitimacy of Chelsea's own stance on this. I believe that Chelsea were genuinely interested in Mudryk, genuinely were trying to sign him. And I mean, they hosted Dario Serna of Shakhtar Donetsk, the director at the club. At the club, they had talks with the players' representatives. It's a pretty big sign of your interest in the player if you're going to that length to speak to the representatives of the club who could make a deal happen. It is clear that Mykhaylo Mudryk wants to move to Arsenal. It is clear that he wants to push for a position, and it's very clear that he'll be very disappointed if a deal does not complete this window. That all being said, I think that Chelsea have probably looked at that and realised that they just don't really have an opportunity or a chance to get this one done. And they've tried, as VW in our chat box says, to save face very much with this one. They've moved and pivoted to other targets very quickly and managed to get them done. And it's as simple as that. He didn't want to go there. He wants to come to Arsenal. And because of that, they've moved away. The surprise being reported amongst Chelsea's hierarchy, I think, is very much being done to try and save face. That does complete our stories of the day. It's very interesting, of course, trying to see where certain moves will happen. We know that Arsenal need to strengthen. We know that Arsenal need to add. And most of all, what we need to add is security to the team. But what you can do to add security to your surfing of the internet, of course, is to use NordVPN. NordVPN have very kindly sponsored the channel once again and are helping to support the channel in many different ways. And if you guys get involved with this latest offer, you can help out too. NordVPN, of course, is a brilliant service to provide you that security online so that you can basically surf the internet stress-free, not having to worry about certain trackers and malware and all of that lovely stuff. And whatever you happen to choose to do whilst you are on the internet can remain very much your own business. You can get an exclusive deal where you get 4 months free if you join up using nordvpn.com/Gooner, including a significant discount on your package as well. If you're not happy with the service, they offer a 30-day money-back guarantee too. So plenty to get involved in. If you don't particularly like the service, there's a way out of it and a way to get your money back too. But it's a great way to keep yourself safe and secure online and keeping what you're doing to yourselves, which is always a positive thing. I don't want to know about it. Anyway, also, we've got the last day of the Football Prizes competition for Eddie and Ketia. You can win, of course, this signed shirt. There is only, I believe, checking on this morning's numbers, 39 tickets sold. So you've got a great chance of getting this one, but you do need to get in before the 7:30 p.m. deadline today. And then hopefully we'll bring you news of a brand new competition in the next few coming days. Okay, let's move to part 2 and your questions right after this. Okay, let's jump into the chat box and get some of your questions. Mike says, just getting a bit frustrating now. Just get it done because the next 6 games is critical and we need backup to support the main team. Mike, thank you first of all for your donation. Really appreciate the kind support to give to the channel. It means a lot. I wanted to actually discuss this frustration that's growing. I've seen a number of comments left on the videos. I've seen a number of comments left in the chat box along the lines of, we're not signing anybody. Edu needs to be sacked if we don't sign anybody by the Tottenham game. If we aren't signing anybody by Tottenham, then people need to answer as to why. I've seen a lot of negativity, a hell of a lot of negativity. I've seen comments maybe like they're seeing similarities between this window and the last window. Now, I have to be, and I'll be blunt. If you can't see the difference between this window and last window, I don't really know how to help you with that because there is clear and absolutely definitive differences between this window and the last window. Let's just rewind. Let's just pop in our time machine a second and go back to January of 2022. Arsenal, of course, were interested in signing a striker. We all know who that striker was. It was Dusan Vlahovic. We were also said to have an interest in Youri Tielemans, the central midfielder. However, the difference between that and these is that Dusan Vlahovic very much wanted to go to Juventus, and that Arsenal could barely even get conversations through to the player. Only for a short period did they even make any kind of contact because it was very difficult to try and convince the representatives that Arsenal were a viable option. Juventus kept on iffing and erring about whether or not they'd do the deal. And then towards the end, of course, after wasting a lot of time of everybody, eventually they did do the deal. With Youri Tielemans, Leicester were not interested in selling him during that window. He didn't have an interest in, of course, renewing his contract then, but they wanted to keep him until at least the end of the season. And so Arsenal ended up signing just 3 players, ironically. One of them, of course, was confirmed in the summer being Matt Turner. The other was Austin Trusty. The other one was Lino Souza, who joined from West Brom to the youth side. But we didn't sign any first-team senior players whatsoever. Now, let's return to 2023, where we now sit. Arsenal are chasing a player that they have had 2 bids already gone in and rejected for in Mykhaylo Mudryk. We had no bids rejected for Vlahovic whatsoever because we didn't even get a bid in. We didn't even get to the point where we could do that. And we are continuing to push for talks with the player, a player that wants to join Arsenal, is desperate to join Arsenal and is doing nearly everything he could possibly do within his power besides really kicking up a fuss to get that deal done. Arsenal also said to have an interest in trying to sign another forward. We've held talks with Atletico Madrid about Joao Felix, but chose in the end not to pursue that deal because of the finances surrounding that, which I completely understand, because I just don't think he's worth what Chelsea are ultimately doing with the structure of that deal. I think you'd have to be mad to really complain about why we didn't do what Chelsea have done with that deal. Imagine really backing a 6-month deal in which he signs an extension at Atleti on a 6-month deal that costs you a ridiculous fee, and you've got no guarantees or even an indication that you would be able to get him on the summer for a reasonable figure. They would have been mad to do that deal. Absolutely mad to do that one. So any complaints about that one, I just think is also just an excuse to boot the club at this stage. We are still pushing to try and find alternatives. There is also said to be interest in midfield. However, the priority at the moment is trying to secure those forwards. If Arsenal are able to get those forwards done and in by a reasonable point in the January transfer window, I imagine what they'll do is they'll switch focus to the midfield and try and see again if they can re-strengthen in that area. But there is a lot going on right now, far more going on than what was going on last year. And I just can't get my head around the anger, the negativity, the bashing, the calls for people's heads. I get my head around it because we've got a very reactionary and emotional fan base. We know that from years of following this club. But I can't get my head around where the anger comes from at this stage, especially considering how we've approached transfer windows, especially considering we are where we are in the league because of what we've done in transfer windows. It's just a frustration, I think, that there's still so much negativity. When on earth are we going to get that faith? Honestly, it really bugs me. And so I have to be honest and talk to you guys about it. Anyway, let's get some comments in the chat box through that, may end up frustrating me even more, but let's see. Andrew says, is it a stretch of the imaginations to think that Shakhtar orchestrated the whole thing about Cerner visiting Stamford Bridge to cause Arsenal to panic and make the bid that they wanted all along? It's not a stretch. Things happen all the time during these windows. Things happen to try and tactics are used to try and get people to move when they might not want to move for certain figures and prices. So no, Andrew, I don't think it's a stretch to imagine that Shakhtar have been using some tactics to try and force Arsenal into panicking and paying big. Akmal says, I saw a link to Eden Hazard. Is there any truth in this? I've personally heard nothing. I did see the report. I just thought it was so ludicrous that I didn't even want to include it in today's stories. I could plaster it on my thumbnail and my headlines on my thumbnail and the video to say, like, oh, look, Eden Hazard. It's a great story. Let's talk about. I just don't really buy it. So I haven't talked about it, but no, I don't believe it. I think it would be mad if Arsenal were considering that one. It would be ridiculous. Brand Percy says, Tom, why am I more dedicated to turning up for this show more so than making my own lunch for work? Is it Arsenal over everything? Brand Percy, I mean, you can surely do both. Just put the phone on the side, make your lunch while it's going on in the background. I get you want to join in with the conversation in the chat box as well. But, you've got to look after yourself. Make your lunch, fella. Benji says, Tom, this does feel like dragging our feet on one transfer, even we're working on multiple targets, which we need to be. How come we're hearing nothing on a midfielder or literally anything else? Now, two things to this. First thing, the club are obviously working on multiple fronts. Actually, three things. The second thing, the priority for the club is trying to bring in those forward areas. Yes, we need to strengthen in midfield, but we do have numbers in midfield, whereas we don't necessarily have the same numbers available in the forward line to a level. You've got Partey, you've got Xhaka, you've got El Neni, you've got Odegaard, you've got Vieira, you've got Smith Rowe, you've got Zinchenko who can play there if you need him to. We have options, yeah? And I think that because we have those options, it does ultimately mean that they are focusing on the forward line whilst Jesus and whilst Nelson are out. The reality is that we don't have Jesus and Nelson now. Yes, we might lose Partey. We might lose Xhaka. There could be an injury to one of those two players, and that sucks. But right now, the injury and the reality is to our forward line. And the reality right now is that we are very short, so much so that we started the front three against Oxford in the FA Cup. We are short, and we need to add there. So that's why that's being a focus. I imagine that the third is that we don't know everything that goes on behind the scenes, Benji. And so everything that we hear is only a percentage of what is ultimately going on in the world of Arsenal transfers. Remember the Fabio Vieira deal, the Callum Chambers exit, the Matt Ryan deal. Things are going on that we don't have a clue about, that we don't know about. And at any moment, at any time, maybe a deal can pop out of nowhere and surprise us. So that always needs to be considered, and that we can't just take all of the noise and whispers and stuff like that as gospel, that it's the only things going on as well. It's important to always remember that. Stephen says, do you think the Oxford game highlighted the difference in quality between our first 11 and the backup? Without a doubt, Stephen, without a doubt. It is obvious that there is a gap between the two. And if we can strengthen, we should strengthen in the midfield. But as I've said a number of times already, we are looking at trying to do that. Era says, City is looking for a bigger cup. Liverpool and Chelsea are having problems. That is the only reason we are top of the league. Don't kid yourselves. Era, that is... I'm going to be very blunt. I feel sorry for you that is your opinion on this as an Arsenal fan. If indeed you are an Arsenal fan, and if you are, I feel very, very sorry that that's your view. Because from my perspective, I am utterly and overwhelmingly excited about where we are, because I can see how we've got to this stage through the recruitment that we've done in the window, through the style of play that we've established, through the improvement of how we are defensively, from the way that we approach games away from home against big teams, the way in which we steal possession, the way in which we dominate games, the way in which we have no fear, the pressing, the energy, the commitment, the unity between the squad. And if after this amount of time and this amount of clear evidence of progression and improvement, that you're still, if you are an Arsenal fan indeed, of course, struggling to admit, to put principles and pride to one side, to admit that what Arteta and this club and Edu and everyone behind the scenes has put together to put us where we are in the table. And if you are still unable to see that, I think you're beyond help. And there's nothing else that I or anyone else can say that is going to convince you. You could argue that we could win the league. And maybe some fans would still turn around and say, yeah, but we only won the league because of this. Get real, grow up, lose your pride, support your team, and enjoy it. Because we haven't been able to enjoy this for a very, very long time. And I, for one, am buzzing to be where we are. Sick of negativity. I'm sick of people being negative for the sake of being negative, just because it panders to a certain crowd. This is great. You know, when Arteta was really at his lowest point, and I was very keen to see potentially a change because I couldn't see a way forwards. And I felt as though it was the done thing for a club to replace him after that Villarreal game. I hated being in that position. I didn't enjoy being in that position. I didn't enjoy jumping onto shows and having to speak critically of Arsenal, because I want Arsenal to succeed. I jumped onto shows talking in that moment because that's how I felt at that time. But there is nothing more I want than Arsenal to succeed. And I can be, grown up enough to admit where I've been wrong about things and to see now what the work that has gone on behind the scenes has achieved. And I'm very, very proud to be an Arsenal fan. I go out with my Arsenal shirt on, wearing it proudly. I'm going to go for my runs. You would never see, because I talked about this on the Eat, Sleep, Arsenal Repeat podcast. The home kit, bright red, is quite a statement thing to wear. I've got that blue and yellow trim jacket as well. They're quite loud things, They turn heads. If you're wearing an Arsenal home shirt in public, it turns heads. You're standing out. It's pretty dull colours when you go out these days. You're standing out, and I'm proud to wear that Arsenal shirt. I'm proud to let people know I'm an Arsenal fan, because I'm happy to be an Arsenal fan. It feels good to be an Arsenal fan right now, and I think people should enjoy it. So take yourself aside for a second, look yourself in the mirror and go, is this for me? Is this supporting Arsenal malarkey? Is this football malarkey really for me? I'm hoping and praying that you're not an Arsenal fan. I really am, and you're just a troll in my chat box. But for the relevance of this show, I feel it's important to point all of that stuff out. Let's go to Max, who says, Tom, honestly, all that for Felix, Chelsea can have him. It's fine. Chelsea are used to bad deals anyway. Fernando Torres, Alvaro Morata, Pulisic, Aubameyang, etc. Yeah. Look, we talked about this yesterday. If you haven't watched our Raw reaction show from the game against Oxford, Harry put forward a really good kind of argument around his frustrations of Joao Felix and Mudryk. The idea that how people can very quickly switch from Joao Felix to Mudryk just like that, basically. I've not seen it myself, really. I haven't seen people switch so rapidly from one to the other. Whilst I had my appreciation for Joao Felix, you saw during our tactical breakdown with Alvaro Romeo that we did. He very much changed my view on Joao Felix and a 6-month loan deal in particular, with the evidence, with his words, with his experience of watching the player and his thoughts on it. And I think that there is enough evidence to say that the deal that Chelsea have agreed to is scandalous. It's as scandalous as the lack of a penalty for Arsenal against Newcastle. That's how scandalous that loan deal is. And if you're genuinely upset or you genuinely think it's horrific that Arsenal didn't agree to those terms and that Chelsea have managed to come in and get Joao Felix on an 11 million euro 6-month loan deal where he's extended his contract with Atletico Madrid, if you're angry about that, I'm glad you're not in charge of the club's transfers. That's all I can say. I'm very glad indeed. Carl says, how much confidence do you have in Lokonga if Xhaka or Partey get injured? Not much, Carl, to be honest. I'm really struggling with Lokonga right now. I'm really frustrated with the lack of opportunities that he's taking. And I think that we do need to absolutely be looking to strengthen. So there you go. Mohammed says it's not negativity to say that we need to be better in closing deals. Now, I don't think that's fair. I'm not saying you're being negative if you're frustrated about how long it's taking to do deals. I honestly believe that it is more of a lack of understanding about the process behind completing transfers, because you don't know how it works. I don't really know how it works. But what I do know is that Arsenal aren't doing this purposefully. Arsenal aren't penny pinching around the Mudryk deal. Arsenal weren't penny pinching around the Joao Felix deal, because the Joao Felix deal was ludicrous. And what's going on is it's a very, very complicated deal to do with a club that are very and notoriously ridiculous when it comes to negotiations. And the situation that Ukraine and Shakhtar is in has added to this even further because of the transfers that, of course, how outside this deal happened, which has put so much pressure financially onto Shakhtar as well. I'm not saying you're negative if you're questioning why these deals are taking a long time. I personally, and with respect, just think it is a lack of understanding about what happens behind the scenes. And that's what I think it comes down to. And that's why I try to be encouraging to you to have that patience and to be more open-minded about what's going on. What I don't have appreciation for is when people are saying that this is the same as last January, because it's not. It is not the same at all. There is so many clear differences. Whilst the outcome at the end of the window, who knows, could be the same. I pray with every fiber of my existence that it isn't. But it might be. But the process that gets us to that point will, of course, have been different as we have approached this window very aggressively. We've gone in hard with 2 very good bids for a player like Mudryk, who might end up costing us more than we want to pay for. And yet, for some reason, and somehow there's still accusations of penny pinching out there. It's not negativity to say that we need to be better in closing deals. I just think it's a lack of understanding on other people's parts about how these transfers happen. It's just my view on it. Omar says Tom's passive-aggressive nature is getting me. I don't want to lose my head in these. And it's not about losing my head in these when I respond to some of these types of comments. It's just a frustration. It's a frustration in the lack of it's a frustration in the lack of open-mindedness about the situation from some. I'm very open always to changing my mind. I don't feel as though other people are as open to changing theirs or appreciating what's gone on. When I do say the Arsenal Lounge with Mo and Shaheen and Lev, it's a very different crowd. And there are people in that chat box that obviously don't watch my show because they don't agree with what I say or they don't particularly like me, and that's fine. But what I've noticed is that those people they're not in the chat box. The same people that were there moaning and complaining about Arsenal when we were losing at our lowest point have disappeared. These people aren't in those chat boxes anymore. They can't face the music. And that's so sad, because that means that it meant more to them to moan. And it means more to them that they're embarrassed about being wrong about Arsenal than it does about supporting and enjoying when things are going well. That's really sad. The club comes before anything else for me. Anything else. My opinion is so secondary to the success of this football club that it's fine if I'm wrong about something. I don't care if I'm wrong about something. Do I like being wrong? No. Do I like being wrong, though, if it means that Arsenal benefit? Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't be happier to be wrong about something if Arsenal are benefiting. If I'm wrong about something, though, and it means that the club isn't going in the right direction, that hurts. That hurts, If I'm right about something and it means that the club aren't doing well, it also hurts. So all I want is for the club to be moving in the right way. So there you go. Um, Hi, Sophie. Thank you for joining us. I was a critic at first. Sophie says, you can't deny what is happening now. It's just nonsense to think otherwise. Bakary Lasagna says, don't get me wrong. This season has been incredible, and you can really see the A-team style plan coming together. We just need the backup signings over the line. Again, I kind of want to get rid of this word backup. I was listening to the Arsenal Vision podcast. I don't know if Elliot's been listening to me, but I, like him, always say backups are a thing of the past. We need to stop signing backups. We need to sign competitors. Backups don't get your foot. Backups don't push the needle. Backups don't take you where we need to go. We need to go and sign players that are going to add competition and quality to the team. Only as the very, very last resort, where a backup is better than nothing, do you go for a backup. But right now, we need to be going for competitive options. That's what we need. Akbar says, yeah, you tell him, Tom. Just reeks of negativity. Understandable when we're 8th, but now first, 5 points ahead of City, and some are still being negative, ? Tomas says, Tom woke up and chose violence. I don't think I'm choosing violence at all. And I know that you're being lighthearted, Omar. Are you people listening not as frustrated as I am to still see negativity at this point, when you can clearly see what is going on? You can clearly see the progression. You can clearly see the improvement. You can clearly see what we're trying to achieve. You can clearly see what the club is trying to do this window, what it's trying to sign, who it's trying to sign. One of the most exciting young players on the continent. You know, I can't get why. Why is there such a need to be negative sometimes, or be really just? I don't get it. Is it pandering to a viewpoint that you can't escape? I don't know. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's a fear that you look silly to change your mind on something. So Sophie said in the chat box, Sophie was a critic at first. I've had my criticisms. We've both changed my mind. Do we look silly? No. We're buzzing. We're enjoying this season. We're loving this season. We're enjoying talking about Arsenal this season. We're enjoying looking back on how wrong we were about certain things. There's no shame in that. That's great. That's a great thing to have. I think it's more shameful if you're sticking by negative views when you just look silly at this point. Nambi says, hi, Tom. Do you think Mudryk's interview with Vlada Zinchenko could have angered the Shakhtar board and has made them even more stubborn? No, they are historically and reputably stubborn in the transfer market. I don't think that has necessarily affected it much significantly. It might have affected it a little bit. I don't think it's had a significant impact on the situation, to be honest, at all. Bizarre says, what are your thoughts on Aubameyang being subbed on and then subbed off? Do you think he's finished? He was subbed on really early in the game, so I'm not going to read too much into it, but I don't know why they signed him. Of course, they signed him under Tuchel and then sacked him, so I don't really know why they did that to bring in Potter. He's not Potter's player. It's very difficult to judge a manager when he doesn't have his players, and I know he's got some players, but that Chelsea team is a mosaic of like 3 different managers, even more than that, and their players. It's very hard to get a grasp on how good a manager is until he kind of gets his squad. I mean, look at Arteta. You know, when he came in, he had a mishmash of players from Wenger and Unai Emery that didn't work together. He had a fractured dressing room. I mean, going even more evidence about what Arteta's done to this squad. And gradually, we've weeded out the weak links and the disruptive players and the quote-unquote big characters. We've got them out, and we are all the better for it. We've got players in. And to be honest, I don't think things are done. You know, there are players in this team that I think were not signed under Arteta that could move on. Kieran Tierney is the one to watch. Kieran Tierney is a player that could genuinely leave Arsenal, I think, in the next year. And he obviously wasn't an Arteta signing. He inherited him. He renewed his contract. He likes him. But it's about if he can play the way that Arteta wants his left back to play. We didn't sign Zinchenko because we needed backup at left back. We signed Zinchenko because he's the perfect profile for what that role entails. That's why we signed Zinchenko. And Tierney, if he can't learn, if he can't adapt to that role, he'll be sold. Does that make him a bad player? No. Does that just mean that he's probably maybe not the right fit for where that position is going in Arsenal's future? Probably, yeah. Are we going to be able to get a very good fee for him because he's a good left back if we sell him? Yes. Do I want to see him go? Not really. I really like him. But we need to put the team first. We need to put the system first. We need to have players that fit the system. And if a player doesn't fit the system and ultimately is not going to take us to where we need to go, they are expendable. And that is the reality. We can like a player as much as I really love Tierney and his character is who he is as a player. I love his quality. But if something don't fit, it don't fit. You know, and put it this way, you can have a great toaster or a great kitchen appliance, right? But if the plug doesn't fit the socket because it comes from somewhere else, you need to find one that's just as good or better that you can plug in that works. And it's as simple as that, really. I can't believe I've compared Tierney to a toaster, but there you go. It's 8 a.m. and we're coming up with some crazy things. Anyway, NSW says, have I blocked the troll? No, I haven't blocked. They've not seen it. I mean, I might not have seen a comment yet, to be honest, but the only time we block people is for a number of reasons. One is obviously trolling. If I don't believe them to be trolling, then, it's just their opinion. That's fine. Abuse, of course. There's also something that I maybe a little bit am too trigger heavy on. But I do very much believe in if someone is not there to support you, if someone is only there to kind of bring you down, I don't really see the worth in having them around. Trim your circles, people. They're just not worth having in your life, to be honest. Anyway, let's have a look. Let's scroll up in the chat box. I might stay on a little bit longer this morning, of course, to tackle some more of your questions. I've got a day off. Got quite a nice day today, actually. I'm going to go see Darren Brown this evening. Very much looking forward to that. He's an illusionist here in the UK, very famous, and it should be fun. I've never been to one of his live shows, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to somewhere called the Cheese Room, which is just cheese, just like cheese in every single meal. It's a cheat day, I have to admit. It's very much a cheat day. It's a Christmas present that I've had to wait a while for. Birthday present I've had to wait a while for. But yeah, there you go. That's my day today. I'm looking forward to it. But I've got a day off, so I'll stick around and take some more of your questions. Amira says, do you trust the fans to provide Mykhaylo Mudryk enough support if he doesn't hit the ground running? The media is bad enough, and while fans have been amazing so far, expectations of a title charge can change things. I think it's important to differentiate between, let's say, the Nicola Pepe deal and the Mudryk deal. When we signed Nicola Pepe, he was signed with the idea that he comes straight into the starting lineup, that he'd been playing in one of Europe's top 5 elite leagues and scoring a ridiculous number of goals. So there was an expectation already there with Pepe because, Saka wasn't as pronounced, anywhere near as pronounced by that stage, was really playing kind of, if he was playing at left back or he was playing in the Europa League. So when Pepe came in, there was the expectation for him to start and hit the ground running and play because he was, in his early to mid-20s. Mudryk's just turned 20, only just turned 22. Has still got a lot to prove. Doesn't come in necessarily straight away to start. He's going to be playing in competition with Martinelli, and he's more of an investment. It's the same kind of thing as Ben White. Like Ben White was an investment. The 50 million at the time that we signed Ben White, a lot of questions, and rightfully. It's a lot of money to pay for Ben White at that time after 1 year in the Premier League. It's fair to say that he's absolutely justified that investment by this stage. Just look what he's done in the last 18 months to justify that price tag. That's going to happen now with Mudryk. Mudryk needs to gradually justify that investment if we indeed do complete the signing. But it is different to the Pepe deal. There's a very big difference between the signing of Pepe in that moment and the signing of Mudryk in this moment. There are differences between the two. Let's go to David says, why is it taking so long for us to nail down Saka, Martinelli and Saliba to new long-term contracts? I think because in this, obviously the World Cup's just happened. That distracted things for a while. Now it's the January window. That's taking precedence right now. After January, hopefully David will see some movement on the contract situation, but our attentions are very much on transfers right now, as opposed to the contract negotiations. Koza says, I'm disappointed that we couldn't get the deal for Felix done, as he was my second favourite player personally. If I had to pick one other attacker, it would be Ferran Torres. Would you be down for that or not? I like Ferran Torres. I don't think he's convincing for everybody, and that's because he's not been able to really kind of nail down that established spot for either Barca or City. Arteta likes him, and I trust the club. And they put a bid in for him at the end of last summer, and it wasn't successful. They clearly like the guy. If they believe him to be the right person to sign, I will back that decision, and I look forward to seeing him in the team. But yeah, I do like Ferran Torres, but I would prefer us to go for kind of a more, especially in this wide area, if we can't get Mudryk, a more natural winger. There's a lot of people that suggest kind of attacking midfielders that play in wide areas, the Smith Rowe style of players, I like to call them. I want us to get a proper winger. We need another winger in this team, and that is what Mudryk ultimately is. Let's go to Jean says, Tom, just figured out the AFTV methodology. Keep feeding into the negatives because it drives engagement from the toxic section of our fan base. Love the Arsenal and the Gooner talk. Now, I think that's unfair on AFTV. Personally, I think AFTV have done a lot in the last year and a bit, especially probably slightly more, to change the perception of it a lot. And you have people on there that I think are very constructive now. You know, we've had James on the channel. James is excellent. Graham, of course, Graham Brooks on the channel is excellent in his tactical analysis. I don't think there is people on there just to drive negativity. Is there still things that I am critical of? Yeah. You know, I'm sure there's people that are critical of the way that I do things on this channel. So, you know, nobody's perfect. But I don't necessarily buy into this, the bash of AFTV in this sense, in this moment. Sure, in the past, we can have our opinions on all that stuff. But, you know, I think I respect when effort goes into trying to change the perception, to try and be better, to trying to improve. I can respect that. And so I think it's fair to respect that. If you don't like it, don't watch it. That's what I always say. Lone Wolf Emperor, also known as Al Ruben, what a name, says, I am all happy being number one, but what I do know is Hill Wood, who hardly has any money, had more ambitions than the Cronkies, and that is the facts. And that is what I want to see KSE back Arteta. Well, I mean, if you look since 2018, and that's when the Cronkies obviously took full control of Arsenal. Since 2018, Arsenal have invested. Arsenal have spent a lot of money. Has it been perfect? No. Did we make an absolute calamity of the Super League decision? Yes. And they should be criticised beyond all measure for buying into that. And then equally, they should be not praised, but I think fair play for backing out of it and listening to the fans at the same time, even though they really didn't have much choice. But KSE, the Cronkies, whatever you think of Stan, whatever, he's silent Stan, he does what he does. I don't care. Josh, I do genuinely believe that Josh cares. I do genuinely believe that Josh wants to see this team succeed. And I do genuinely believe that they are trying to back us to get to that point. And if we are going for Mykhaylo Mudryk, a player that Arteta really wants, and a player that we will probably end up overpaying beyond our valuation of him, you can't say that that's then the ownership not backing Arteta, because they're getting him a player for more than he's worth because we want him. You know, Arteta wanted a lot of players, and we've managed to get him a lot of players in this last 3 to 4 years, and nearly pushing on for 5 years. If you go all the way back to 2018, of course, we've really backed whoever's been at the helm. So I think that the KSE kind of rhetoric does get a little bit lost sometimes, and isn't always accurate. Let's scroll down some more. Manu says, why have Shakhtar been able to recruit many good players? It's pretty strange for such an unpopular league. Shakhtar have obviously a lot of links in Brazil. They've signed a lot of players from Brazil. They didn't have the work permit issues, of course, that Arsenal and other Premier League sides have had, that have made it easier to sign young players from those leagues, like Bernard, like Tyson, like Douglas Costa, like Fred, these types of players. So because of that, it makes it much easier. It's also a really good stepping stone club, and a lot of players have seen it as a bit of a stepping stone club. So they can see, if I go to Shakhtar and perform really well, I can get a really good move to another big club. Because just look at the pathway. You know, look at Douglas Costa going to Bayern Munich. Look at Fred going to Manchester United. You know, these are examples of players signing for big teams after moving to Shakhtar. So there's a pathway there. They're an attractive club in that, and have been in the past. Of course, there's a lot of complications right now, but there's a lot of attractive qualities about seeing a stepping stone club into Europe's biggest and most elite clubs. So I think that's probably one of the reasons as to why. Let's go down a bit more. Mohammed says, I get the deals need time, but we are slow. We had 2 months break to prepare for this crucial window, and now we're halfway through. Also, what do you think about my shout of Mitoma? Yeah, I've already said, Mohammed, a number of times that Mitoma is a player that I very much like and would be very open for a signing. So that's that. The slow thing, I always ask someone, and I do the phone-in show sometimes, and I say, if you think we're slow, what would you do differently? Like, what would you do? Like, what's the solution to not being slow in your mind? It's very easy to go, oh, we're slow. We need to be faster. What's your solution? What's your solution to us not being slow? Don't turn around to me and say, oh, I'm not a sporting director. I'm not a person who works in the game. I don't know. Because if you don't know, then how on earth have you got any perspective to say that it's slow? If you're that forward thinking and thinking it's slow, if you're that sure that we're slow, don't turn around to me saying, well, it's not my job. It's not my job to come up with the solutions to be quicker. That's on them. Or how about having the perspective that you realize that actually, no, this is just kind of how it works with some players. It doesn't help that you see players like Gakpo sign for Liverpool very swiftly. It's a different player. It's a different profile. It's a different scenario. It's a different context, different price tag. It's very different. So that's what I always kind of say is that if we're slow, what's your solution to us being faster and still getting the players that we need, want, and have to get during this window? Let's go to Wade, who says, in response to Alexandra Lawson, who I've not seen the comment of, so it's always tricky for me to then follow these threads. It's like a thread within a thread within a thread in our chat book sometimes. Alexandra Lawson was looking at Ansu as a loan deal, but you're right. Lots of injuries, outstanding young talent. I really like him, but I'm sure there's other options. I assume that was a comment about potentially signing Ansu Fati from Barcelona on loan. It would need to have some kind of future to it. That's what I'm always with. Where we're at this stage, if you're signing somebody on loan, it needs to be someone that has a future. Like the Ødegaard situation, yes, there wasn't an option or an obligation, but there certainly was discussions around Arsenal potentially signing him in the summer, and that ultimately happened. So that's important to consider. We have to have a future in that. Mohammed says it's about how our backroom staff work and take initiatives and chances when and how long they negotiate. That's not a solution. Tell me how we be faster. You're saying take initiatives. It's how they work. Well, what is it? How they work? What initiatives? What chance? I need some actual explanation, detailed about what the solution is before we can start going, we're too slow in the market. Ira says, we have a decade of disaster and know as fans that we can become cheerleaders because we are top after 17 games. I don't know what is a fan outside of being a cheerleader, because I'm pretty sure a fan is a cheerleader, is it not? I feel like the word cheerleader is being used to denigrate the idea of what a fan is. I go to games when I go as a fan and I cheer. And I sometimes want to lead those cheers. Yeah, sometimes when things are down, for instance, those moments where like we're on the attack and like everyone in the ground suddenly stands up. When I used to go as a fan rather than going as a journalist as I do now and sit in the press box where I can't get up and shout and stuff like that. When we're on the attack, I'll be one of the first to stand up in the crowd and we're like, God, and I nearly swore then. You know what I mean, though? Like, be one of the first to be standing up and getting the crowd off their feet and shouting and screaming, doing what you need to do in the ground to get behind the team. If you're a cheerleader, good on you. Cheer your team. Be a leader of those cheers. Like, I don't know what the criticism is. I don't know. Omar says, to be fair, I can't imagine Tom leading a chant. I tell you, after a couple, and I'm really in that kind of frame of mind. I love it. I love it. I really miss it, and I really hope that. I really hope to go to a game as a fan again at some point. And I was chatting to Kaya about this the other day. You do take it for granted, and yes, I'm not going to start asking for sympathy. I have a dream job. I'm not going to lie. I have an absolute dream job. I get to go to games, cover the Arsenal, talk to the players, talk to the manager. It's amazing. I'm not taking it for granted. But what I think sometimes I have taken for granted is the act of going to the game as a fan, being in the crowd, shouting and screaming, getting behind your players, getting angry, frustrated if you've lost, and gutted if you've lost. And obviously, I still feel that way when we lose. But, that feeling after the game. But at the same time, on the opposite side of the coin, the raw emotion of winning. I think back to the game. One of my favourite games I ever went to was when we beat Liverpool at home 4-1. Bellerin scored, Ozil scored, Alexis scored, Giroud scored. And I watched that game on my own because I managed to get a ticket, and I didn't go to the game with anyone in the ground. I saw a lot of people after and before the game that I knew, but I was sitting on my own in the ground, and I must have hugged 15, 16, 17 people I'd never met before during that game, because it was such a raw, massive victory, that game, and we won 4-1. And I do miss that. And I remember being at the Oxford game, and I'm sitting there next to Art de Roche from the Athletic, and I don't know if he's hearing me being so stupid, but sometimes, because I can't get involved with the chants, I'll sit there and I'm just kind of mouthing them while the fans are singing, or I'm just whispering them while the fans are singing, or I'm just saying them slightly under my breath, because it's tough. And when a goal goes in, it's tough to sit on your hands. It really is. And I have lost it a couple of times in the press box, and I have kind of broken character, if you like, not character, but broken the facade of the journalist. And you do you do go for it. And me and Cara are both guilty of it sometimes, because there's big moments in games. When that the Leeds game, for instance, when I was at the Leeds game, I don't know if I have a photo of it, but when I was at the Leeds game, the where I was sitting was right next to the away fans. There was like this giant long bench. There wasn't like seats in the press box where there sometimes are at other grounds. It was a giant long bench, and then next to me was all of the fans. So I can try and show you an image of this. Let me try and get this up on my screen quickly. But where I take this video from, it's like that is where I'm sitting. So I'll try and show the screen. But so that's where I'm sitting. You can see there's clapping going on in front of me. And if you look to the left of me, where I've just pan slightly to the left, it's just fans. And that's like all Leeds supporters. So imagine for a second the chaos that went on at the end of that game between us and Leeds. Gabriel penalty red card situation. Trying to sit on your hands and not react during those moments is so hard. And I definitely took for granted that period of going just as a fan. And I really look forward to the next game that I can go to where I'm just sitting in the stands as a fan. So yeah, that means a lot, and I do miss it, and I hope to go again as a fan, fingers crossed, very, very soon. Meat says, Tom, any news on how much will sell Tavares for? No, but I doubt it's 40 million. Tom says, Tom, a criticism of the crowd at the Emirates is we're getting much better in terms of the atmosphere, but are still very poor with the human pyramid element of the classic cheerleading. I want to see more human pyramids in the crowd at the Emirates. That's what we need, is more human pyramids, Tom. Absolutely. And I've met Tom at one of the games, and he's a nice lad. It's going to feel that's so patronizing. It's the hope that kills you says, just seeing Tom, the ultra, always the quiet ones. Love you, Tom. You're a legend. I wouldn't describe myself as one of the Ashburton army. I'd love to get involved with just that raw emotion of football. There's nothing like it. So I remember when I was teaching, I'd be sitting in the staff room with other teachers talking about football, because that's all I talked about. Boring as hell. And some people would just be saying, like, I don't like football, I don't get football. And I'm in my mind, I'm going, how can you not like football? Like, what are you doing with your life on the weekends if there's no football to get that raw attachment to? People like what they like. Yeah, it's I love being an Arsenal fan right now more than I ever have, I think, in my entire life. I think it's been this, I grew up with the Invincibles being very much in my early childhood, so I can never really appreciate them. I can never really have the adult emotion that I have now as a fan. I was 18 when we won the FA Cup in 2014 in that 13-14 season, and obviously that was a bit of a peak, winning, really being able to appreciate a trophy. Because I'm only 28, so there's a lot of fans that listen to the show that are a lot older than me that had very much experiences beyond what I was able to experience. But now, sitting top of the table, I feel like this is absolutely the happiest, the most emotional, the most passionate I feel about Arsenal right now than I ever have in my conscious supporting life. It's great. I absolutely love it. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry that this one's gone on a little bit longer than what it usually does. It's been an emotional show. It's been a raw show, and I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed tackling some tough topics. I've enjoyed tackling the trolls, and I've enjoyed taking your questions. I really appreciate it. Do drop a like on the video. Do subscribe to the channel if you're new. As always, I won't be back today with the show because, as I say, I've got a day off and I'm going up to London and doing some cool stuff up there with the missus. So I won't be back today. I'll be back tomorrow. There isn't going to be an Eat, Sleep, Arsenal Repeat podcast this week. Apologies. Our schedules just didn't line up. We weren't able to record it this week, but hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be back next week for the next episode of Eat, Sleep, Arsenal Repeat. But please still do keep joining the Strava group. That's www.strava.com/clubs/ESARP. And get involved with our fitness drive and join us next week for the next one of that. Dalusu says, Tom, you didn't read my super chat. I must have missed it. Here it is. Hi, Tom. If we sell Kieran Tierney, how much do you think that we would get for him? 40-ish, I think. It depends on how long is left on his contract. Depends on the clubs that are in for him. But Dalisu, I'm going to go for 40-ish, 40 to 45 million for Tierney is what I'd go for. So there you go. Sorry that I missed that one. Thank you for listening. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. I will see you tomorrow morning, bright and early, 8 a.m., as always. And as always, up the Arsenal.